Today we're talking about Daji. Again, Daji got buffed, and not just a little bit, but quite a lot. What did get buffed? Pretty much every ability in her kit. Horrible Burns now applies a slow in addition to the extra damage. 1000 cuts has increased base damage per rank and increased scaling. It is also now knock-up immune while channeling. Trickster Spirit no longer has a post-fire delay. Pao Lao gets multiple buffs as well. One increasing the duration of the shooting time, one increasing the duration of the deployable itself, and the chains are easier to see. So that is quite a lot for a single buff. Why is that so? Because no one was playing Daji. She was not very successful overall. There was not much of a reason to pick her over other assassins. She is specifically often compared to Serket, who has the same single target damage pretty much in another way, different applications, higher crit chance or works better with crit, not so much dot focus damage, and she gets out a lot better. So really, why would you play Daji? With these buffs, there may be more of a reason to play her. And obviously it begs the question if these changes change anything about her leveling order, about her builds, and so on. That's exactly what we'll look into. Let's begin with the ability leveling. The one that I proposed in my previous video was basically focusing on Horrible Burns, but putting 3 points into 1000 cuts first to have a decent clear, decent lane push potential, a decent jungle camp clear and everything, and then later on shifting over to Trickster Spirit, and eventually finishing up Pao Lao and 1000 cuts. Does this still apply? Yes, but no. And how does that make sense? Think Thor. Thor is one of the few assassins that we know who has a choice between two abilities. You can pretty much always decide to level his 1 or his 3. The decision here is much more about A, if you want that range extra poke or if you want that AoE damage swing, and more primarily focus on the decision if you can be interrupted a lot while using your 3. Thor's 3 is knock-up immune, so as such, you will often face comps that primarily rely on knock-up for the interrupts, and in those cases, you can level the 3 because no one can really stop you from it. You can use your 1 as an escape or engage tool more often, instead of looking for direct poke with it, which can be very, very helpful. If the enemy has a lot of escapes, if the enemy is very much prone to burst for some reason, if the enemy has a lot of stuns, a lot of interrupts that cancel you out of the 3, then you level the 1 instead. With Daji, we have, in a way, a similar picture. 1000 cuts is now knock-up immune, like Thor's 3. If the enemy has a lot of knock-ups, and that's their primary CC, then you can use your 2 a lot better. So for example, if you're trading a Vulcan, you can use your 2 and he basically has no means of getting away from you, at least not very far. He can only use his 1 anymore, he cannot knock you away, and you will still deal huge amounts of damage to him. Now, in the same context is still the question, do you use the 2 to actually deal damage, or do you use it to close the distance? You have the 3 for that as well, so it's a bit depending on the situation. But overall, you can see that the 2 gets a lot more value out of being interrupted less. Now, if we look at the direct damage comparison, there are some interesting things to note. 1000 cuts has one of the weirdest scalings in the game in terms of how it increases per rank. It starts with 15 base value per attack swing, so you get a total of 60 damage on rank 1. This is relatively low. This is why her rank 1, her level 1 feels really weak in terms of clearing. You still get the extra damage from the bleed though, so it's not like the damage is completely lackluster, but it feels weaker than most early abilities. But that's due to the fact that it has 25 flat scaling. So with the next rank, on top of these 15 damage, you will not get an extra 10 damage, an extra 15 damage, you will get extra 25 damage. So while the first rank of this ability deals 60 damage, the next rank deals 160 damage in total. After that though, the scaling does not increase anymore. It's 100 per rank, so afterwards it will stay at plus 100, it goes from 160 to 260. This is odd. If you look at, for example, Thor's 3, it starts with 20 flat and it ticks 5 times, so you get 100 total damage. And then on the second rank, you get another 20 flat on top of that, so it ticks for 200, and then it goes to 300, 400, 500. So it's this even scaling. With Daji's 2, it's very, very important to get that second point into the 2 because it's super, super rewarding with the scalings she has now. It literally more than doubles the damage of the ability, and that should be enough of a reason to level at least 1 point into it, especially because this point is also very, very helpful for clearing camps. At the same time, there's also more of a reason to level the 1. While you only get 60 extra damage per rank on the 1 and not all of it is instant, so it's also gonna be some time until that damage is through, same as on the 2, The difference is that this ability now gets a slow on top, and it's also on a much lower cooldown. The slow scales with 5% per rank, though the first rank here is the first 10%, and that's the most important part, so the biggest chunk is on the first rank. But seeing as you can basically get 2 1s off in the same time as you get 1 2 off, you get an extra 120 damage really when you directly compare the damage per rank, and you get that slow on top. So in terms of single target damage in a slightly extended trade, the 1 will still be better. So, bit of a hard decision here in my opinion. I would generally advise for leveling the 1 after you have 2 to 3 points in the 2, so it's sufficient for clear still. But it depends a lot more on situations and playstyle. If you do the classic engaging with a 3, doing 1 basic, doing the attack cancel versus 1 combo the most, then obviously it makes a lot of sense to level the 1, because that's what you deal your damage with. I would argue that it's still more worth now to level the 2 over the 3 in this whole scenario, because you will still use the 2 often enough, but the 1 should still be a primary focus here, as it does most damage in that regard, as you will be sure that you can get all of those damage ticks on the target, as it's the first thing you use when you jump your target. Then again, the 2 with its increased damage can be a lot more impactful in team fights, and also if you get all the hits of the 2 onto your target, it'll apply more bleeds, and the bleeds in the end translate into more damage, because every bleed is around 30 damage depending on which item you have relatively early on, and those extra 60 damage would then outclass the damage from the 1 again. So as you can see, this debate can go back and forth and back and forth. Really, it comes down to how you play. If you're looking for early team fights, if you're looking for multiple targets quite often, if you're possibly looking to engage with your 2, then it can be very reasonable to level the 2 over the 1 now. Likewise, if you're looking to get a lot of basics on your target, you're looking for a more basic attack-oriented build, even though her attack chain is still clunky, that's more possible with the slow on the 1 now, so you should look to maximize the 1 if you're looking for that, if you're thinking you can get more than 1 punch on the enemy, or if you want to set up for your team with those slows or whatever. There are so many conditions, so many reasons for either of them now, that it's really hard to give you a general statement on what you should do in every situation. You can also factor in that there could be a healer and that makes dots less effective, or somebody has an easy immunity against the swings of your 2 like Chang'e. So many things factor in here that I will not say you should do this over the other. I would always advise for 2 points into the 2 at least, 3 points off nice for clear, and after that change up depending on which build you want to go for, which playstyle you want to go for, and maximize accordingly. I would no longer recommend maxing the 3 before the other 2, because really it's a lot easier to apply the damage of the 2, even if you primarily look to use it as an escape. An exception case may be a team with 5 stuns, for example, where you would never use the 2 to actually attack someone really. As for Pao Lao, the damage is still insanely good, and I will not say that it shouldn't be leveled, but at the same time it's still so annoyingly hard to hit with these slow delayed chains and so many ways to interrupt it, get out of it just by using beats or getting out of range or whatever. So really, I don't think it should be a primary focus. It's not where your damage comes from usually, though when you can apply it, it can make for some really good plays and you can really turn a fighter out, especially if you put some points into it. And in the end, the 3 doesn't do too much through leveling except for some extra damage. Most of the 3's damage comes from the scaling though. As for the item build, all of the items that I recommended in my last video are still pretty much applicable. I will link that right here. You can go for CDR, you can go for power, she scales very well with power, you can go for penetration, you can, if you really want to, look for a little bit of crit for some attack cancels, but not primarily the focus. A little bit of protection goes a long way on her because she doesn't have the best means of getting away, and that all factors in. But before we close the item section off, I wanted to show you this table right here. I'm not going to talk about everything here in detail, you can just pause the video here and look at the numbers if you're interested in that, but what I want to talk about is the results of this. So there's this discussion of if you should build Jotuns, Hydras, Heartseeker, Shifters first. And I figured let's get an informed opinion on that and actually go into the jungle practice, look at everything and compare the values. So what I did is once I try all abilities on an enemy, so everything except the ultimate, the 1, 2, 3, plus 3 basic attacks, so 1 after the first teleport, then the one that comes with the 1 and then after using my 2. And another combo where I just used the 3 and the 1 and 2 basic attacks, so the very quick combo that she can do. The result for the first combo that I mentioned is very interesting. The highest damage here actually comes from Shifter's Shield, which is not the most expensive item here, and also gives you a lot more survivability. We're talking about 1259 damage. Obviously, this is against an Odin bot. This is on level 4, not completely comparable, but you understand how these values are applied, and it will work that way in the game in general. The second strongest item here is Hydra's Lament, but only by a hair's length. It is 1184 damage, whereas Jolton's Wrath comes in at 1169 damage. Now, we have to keep in mind that Hydra's Lament is a little bit cheaper. It's a 300 gold difference, which can be nice early on, but at the same time, Jolton's Wrath gives you 10% more cooldown reduction, and overall, the items are otherwise quite even now. So I feel that even though the values are slightly lower and the item is slightly more expensive, Jolton's Wrath may be a little bit more helpful for her now, simply because of the fact that so much CDR does so much for her. It allows her to use her 1 more often in a fight, it allows her to use her escapes better, which is very important for her, and generally CDR is a very valued stat on her. Also, always getting 3 attacks after getting a Hydra's proc is a bit optimistic, so this scenario kind of favors Hydra's. If a single one of these would not be a Hydra's proc, it would be less damage already. In the end, it's a matter of preference, but I see Jolton's being a little more favorable, especially if you want to build Shifters afterwards, because then the pen and the extra power from that synergize really well in regards to her ability damage, and especially if you were looking to max the 2 early on. The last one in the rankings here is Heartseeker. Even with its extra damage proc, it falls flat with a 1125 damage, and also the second highest price after Jolton's with 2400 gold. Not really much of a reason to build it anymore unless you really want the movement speed. If we're looking at the quicker combo with a 3 plus 1 plus 2 basic attacks, then you'll see that the difference is even smaller. Shifter's Shield is still in the lead, almost 700 damage, whereas Hydra's and Jolton's are somewhat closer to 650, and Heartseeker is just slightly behind Jolton's here, minor difference. In the end, again, this is something that I would say generally favors Shifters over the others, but if you're looking for CDR, I'd probably go for Jolton's, and if you really want to attack cancel, then Hydra's is your best friend. This should give you a decent overview of the changes to Dodgy, what they do, and what you have to consider now. Generally, I would say she is a lot stronger than before. She has a lot more potential. I would not say she's suddenly the best assassin. We're not at that point yet, and I would still say that I would probably pick many others over her that have more control, simply because her ult is still clunky, her 3 is still delayed, so the basic attack after the 3 is slightly delayed. And I talked to Hyra's Capstock on Twitter, this is potentially due to some engine-related things, and not actually something that is coded that way. So even though the delay on the 3 has been removed afterwards, it's still slower than just using a basic attack. Makes it a little bit clunky, her take chain still feels clunky, so she still has those downsides that I don't really see why they're there. But other than that, she definitely feels better, and she definitely feels more fun to play. And I would say, at least on a casual level and like normal ranked level probably soon, you will be able to play her a lot more successfully than before this patch. With that, thank you guys for watching. I hope to see you all for the next one tomorrow. If you're not subscribed yet, feel free to click that sub button and maybe the bell, that really helps me out. Duke Sloth, out.